Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the part of the world that you are joining us today. Wherever in the world you are, welcome to this MIT Global Scale webinar. Today we will speak about agri-food value chains. My name is Chris Mejia. I'm the director of the MIT Emerging Market Economy Logistics Lab, what it used to be called the Food and Retail Operations Lab. And today I will serve as the moderator of this panel. And as a Mexican, I must tell you that I would like to add some kind of a spiciness to the conversation today. Some food for thought wouldn't be bad, and we will be cooking this today together with you. How many of you knew that around 11 billion tons of food are produced around the world every year? Now imagine that you need to throw away 1/3 of that. That is almost 4 billion tons per year due to different issues, most of them related to cold chain issues or different types of aspects that are happening. Now consider that there are like around 2.7 billion people suffering from some kind of food malnutrition. It can be food insecurity, food related issues as obesity and overweight. And actually you can conclude that there is a food logistics issue happening there. Food safety protocols are failing, and then we need to do something else, some better efforts to change that. But how we can do that in an easier way? There is no easy way. That's the answer. But today we will discuss some trends, challenges, myths, and I would say also solutions or potential strategies about this fascinating topic that touches my heart really closely. In general, agri-food supply chains are complex, multifactorial, and interdisciplinary. For that reason, we invited the different experts in food from our global scale network and an external subject matter expert from UNIDO, and I would like to introduce them all to you. Dr. Yasmin Sabri is originally from Egypt, but works at the UK Scale Center, our brand new center at the Loughborough University, as an associate professor. She accumulates 7 years of experience in energy, food, and business development sectors before she joined academia, where she actually has developed plenty of projects related to logistics, quality, and food supply chains, particularly for Europe and the UK-based universities. She will discuss a little bit more about resilience during climate change and extreme weather conditions. Then we have Dr. Mohammed Hamza Nassim. He's originally from Pakistan and works for the Chinese Scale Center, NISCI, and Ningbo as a postdoctoral fellow. He has over 5 years of working experience in sales, foreign trade, and market development and operations. He graduated from Wuhan University with a focus in transportation, and he's currently working in digital transformation and sustainability for food supply chains. Then let's go to Dr. Laura Palacios Arguello. She's Colombian and works as a research scientist at the Luxembourg Center for Logistics. She has actively worked on diverse projects between Europe, particularly France and other countries, in sustainable related topics, urban logistics, and local food supply chains. She holds a PhD from the Mines de Saint-Étienne and is an active collaborator of MIT CTL for different laboratories. She will share with us her experience in local short supply chains. Last but not least, we have our external speaker, who is Dr. Gabor Mornan. He's Hungarian and works as a development officer for the United Nations, particularly for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. He has worked for OPEC, Middle Eastern organizations, for his country as well, for the government, and possesses over 10 years of amazing experience working for UNIDO in food safety, food compliance, sustainability, capacity building, innovation, and quality. He holds a PhD in food science and is an active member of the MIT ML team. Well, as you heard from me, we have a talented group of experts today coming from emerging market economies and work with developed countries, and I'm sure that we will have a great conversation. So to get started, each of the speakers will have 4 to 5 minutes to make a short presentation to position an important topic that they consider important to be discussed today. So now let me welcome Dr. Yasmin Sabri. So Yasmin, the floor is yours. I'm going to be sharing your presentation. So welcome to the panel.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for the invitation and for giving me this opportunity to speak today about a topic that is also very, very close to my heart, which is resilient food supply chains. And very warm welcome to all our 41 participants that I see on the participant list. So if we can go to the first slide, please,
Oh yeah,
Chris.
sorry. Here we go.
No worries. Thanks. So I'm not going to present myself. You've already presented it, but just a bit of a quick background on this research. It was a research that was done in collaboration between UK universities, representing myself and colleagues who work in Egypt and in Brazilian universities. So what we wanted to know is how to make food supply chains more resilient. And when we started to look into this, we looked into it starting from the climate change and how it affects food supply chains. And then this was the starting point, but this was not our end point because it took us to it kind of opened the doors to a completely new world to us because we actually found out, as I will show you in a minute, that we need a transdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary approach if we want to look into how to make our food supply chains more resilient and sustainable. And if we want really to create a food secure future for the future generations, especially in the global south, we must really look into how we do our research and how we engage with the local communities and the policymakers as well. So if we move to the next slide, please, Chris. When we started, we tried to understand what exactly is there a food crisis, and actually the numbers are quite shocking. So almost globally, almost 1 in every 3 people is suffering from hunger, is suffering from a food crisis. We're talking about 2.3 billion people globally, and most of them are concentrated in low and middle income countries, specifically in the global south. We're talking about 70% of those who suffer from acute hunger and food insecurity are actually in the global south countries. Africa comes as the region with the highest food insecurity prevalence globally, and then this is also followed by Latin America. And we're talking about a massive number of 340 million people in both continents that suffer from this. And contrary, which is, I think this is a controversial point because actually most of the countries in the global south, they are actually major food producers. And this was quite, made us very curious. Okay, what is going on there? Because these are the countries where food is being produced, but they are actually the most that are being affected by food insecurity. So for example, in Egypt and Brazil, around 30% of the households are facing food insecurity. So this gives us the impression that, okay, we really need to address the vulnerabilities across the entire supply chain, because in food production, we do have the food production. So it was apparent to us that this is not a food production problem as much as it is something else. So if we move to the next slide, please, Chris. So we already established that there is a food crisis, but then we wanted to know what drives this food crisis, what drives these kind of acute hunger globally. So we looked, as I said before, I mean, we looked at the climate-driven crisis. We looked at extreme weather events, meteorological hazards, rising sea levels, and emissions in transport, and how this and obviously this leads to water scarcity, particularly in countries in African continent specifically. And this has been also compounded by very challenging socioeconomic situations, because it became apparent to us that in order to be aware of climate change, in order to be aware as a local community of how to address climate risks, you actually need to have certain access to resources. So the socioeconomic dimension also came to our attention when we were discussing this research. And as you have alluded to in your introduction, Chris, there is also a supply chain crisis. So if we move to the next slide, please. The supply chain crisis, as you have mentioned, there is a huge waste, whether it's food lost or food waste. So we're talking about almost 50 kilograms of food per person per year worldwide. And this is a massive, massive, massive problem. And it is a supply chain problem. This is not a food production or agriculture problem. This is a supply chain problem. And due to lack of infrastructure, due to the lack of cold chains, lack of access to proper facilities, particularly in rural areas in these lower and middle income countries in Africa or in South America. So this is induced by the food loss and food waste as a result of the extreme weather events, water scarcity that are also resulting in a lot of food loss and waste that results in making the supply chain extremely vulnerable. So as you could see, this is kind of a compounding effect on the supply chain and on food insecurity. Adding to this also is there is a lot of challenges related to the retail and the consumption behaviors when it comes to food insecurity as well. So moving to the next slide, we wanted also to understand this from the socioeconomic dimension, because as I mentioned now, this became kind of interconnected problem. So we wanted to, we have seen from our research that there is concentration of small and family-owned small producers. Most of these farmers and producers are very, very small in size, which means they are quite reliant on the government subsidies to actually continue working and to make sure that they are actually continue being linked to supply chains in the first place. So with rising of also inflation, national debt, especially I would say that most of the 65% of the African countries, they are in debt to the IMF. So with all these kind of situations, it became very, very obvious that we need to build capacities. So a big part of and what we would recommend and argue is we need to engage the local communities. We need to engage policymakers in order to understand how we can build communities that are more resilient themselves. They have this awareness that these communities can develop coping and adaptive and transformative capabilities so that they can mitigate these kind of cascading effects of extreme weather events. So we argue in the next slide, and this is going to be my last slide, that we need this transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary approach. When we are looking into researching resilient food supply chains, we have to have researchers from cross-disciplinary. So in this research, for example, we were a team from engineering, supply chain, social enterprises, and climate scientists. So we were a group of extremely multidisciplinary team. And this is what we argue, that we need to adapt to this kind of cross-disciplinary approach to solve, or at least to provide any meaningful recommendations to policymakers, with engaging local communities and with also engaging the private sector in this. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Jasmine. So this is very insightful. So the framework that you are showing, I'm going to start sharing now. So it's really, really interesting, because at the end, what you are positioning is that food supply chains are a big issue that affect also the socioeconomic performance of particularly smallholder players, right? And this can create like big issues in the micro and the macroeconomic perspective. So thank you very much for sharing that. Now I will pass the word to Hamza. So Hamza, take it over, please. I'm going to be sharing your slide deck in a moment.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you very much, Yasmin, for setting a base for our webinar. Well, I'm Hamza, and I'm joining from China, and I'm a part of NICE Research Network. Today, I'm gonna discuss about how digital technologies like IoT, blockchain, and AI can help make our food supply chain not just faster or more efficient, but smarter and sustainable. One area I have been particularly focused on is how we manage perishable goods, especially the part of the chain that often go unnoticed, like returns, recalls, or redistribution of perishable goods. So today, I want to share some insights from our recent research where we looked into the gaps that exist in the technology adoption in food logistics, and how we can help organizations, especially in emerging market, make better, more informed decisions about digital investments. So let's start by looking at a big picture. Why do we even need a shift in how we manage food supply chains? So as Yasmin told us, like globally, the food system is responsible for nearly 30% of all of the greenhouses gas emissions, right? So and despite that, we are still wasting a huge amount of food. Over the third 1/3 of the food we produced is a waste. And on top of that, our supply chain are undergoing stress, and we have seen the impact of climate change, trade disruptions, and of course COVID-19, which led up around 25% loss in availability of perishable food. So clearly we need more than just efficiency, right? We need food system that are resilient, transparent, and adaptable. And I believe that digital transformation and sustainability are just not buzzwords. They are the foundation of next generation supply chain. So in this slide, I'm gonna discuss about how digital tech tools can actually make this transformation possible, and I will share my research insights with you. So for example, if we talk about IoT, it helps us to track perishables in real time, monitoring temperature, humidity, and movement through every stage of cold chain, right? That kind of visibility is crucial to reducing spoilage. Similarly, if we talk about blockchain, it adds another layer, right? Giving us a tamper-proof traceability that's incredibly important in high-risk food like seafood, dairy, or meat, where safety and origin matters. So similarly, we also have AI and machine learning, including digitalization in Industry 4.0, and which can optimize delivery routes, cut down fuel usage, and even some kind of drone deliveries and AI we use remote sensing and precision agriculture in farming, which help growers apply water and fertilizer more efficiently, and sometimes it can help them to reduce the usage by 20 to 30% by without hurting yields. That is very important. And but here's a problem: despite all of the potentials, many companies, especially in emerging markets, are unsure which technologies to invest in. The market is complex and the risks are high. So for that purpose, in my recent research, we have developed a structured decision-making framework, and we use fuzzy AHP and fuzzy Topsis method combined with TOE, which is Technology Organizations Environment Framework, to create a practical tool for managers. And we have identified and ranked 14 different evaluation criteria, and including like cost, scalability, but also something often overlooked like social acceptance. And our finding shows that that is very interesting. Like IoT was the most suitable, mainly because it directly addresses perishability risks, and blockchain ranked high too, but especially when we use alongside with IoT. But many decision makers still focus mainly on cost without considering the usability and trust within local communities. So as we move towards smarter food system, our argument is that it's not just about what tech is available, it's about what's viable, inclusive, and adaptable to the local context, right? So thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Hamza. So this is extremely interesting because this reminds me something that I experienced at the Vienna Food Safety Forum that Gabor invited me last week. And you are talking about, like technological solutions and how they can adapt to the realities and that different countries or different sectors, different products are facing. So this is particularly interesting. So, however, I will cook now a question for you. Maybe you can think about it, and it's related to how you can ensure the adaptability, the adoption rate of these different, like technologies. Sometimes it's one of the hardest parts or challenges to get done, right? So meanwhile, I'm gonna share the word to my colleague Laura. So Laura, you're next in line. Please take it over.
Thank you, Chris, for the invitation. So today I'm going to talk about short and local agri-food supply chains in France, in Luxembourg. So I have been developing some projects with local farmers, local producers in Luxembourg and in France. So here you can see a global food supply chain, right? With multiple intermediaries, multiple channels to connect the producer to actually the consumer. And the question here is how to connect the producer and the consumer in a shorter way, a shorter path. So what we call short food supply chain. And actually that is the Ministry of Agriculture and Food have defined as the distribution of agricultural products, which is carried out by either by direct sale from the producer to the consumer or by indirect sale only with using one intermediary. So that means that intermediary that actually doesn't add value to the final product. So if we see there's a lot of different campaigns and campaigns in France and in Luxembourg. So we have I buy local, I support my local producer in France, or Taste Luxembourgish as a campaign to encourage the local food production. So to encourage the final consumers to buy locally. There are also the AMAP, which in France is the Association for Maintaining Small-Scale Farming, which are very popular to connect actually the final consumer with the local producers. In France, there has been also local laws. For instance, this one, the Loi Egalim in 2020 requires public canteens, so the school canteens, hospital, prisons, to source 50% of the food as sustainable food, including 20% of organic. So this is some of those laws that actually support the local producer, but also think about the end consumer. So, but it is challenging, right? When we talk about local short food supply chain, it's very challenging, especially in other contexts as Luxembourg. So you can see here the self-supply ratio of different products. So beef, milk, pork, eggs, vegetables, chicken, fruits. And you can easily identify that Luxembourg has a strong food import dependency, especially in fruits and vegetables. So over 95% of the products are sourced from the neighbor countries. So this means that locally is not always a similar topic of sustainable, right? So when we talk local from the logistic point of view, it means reduction in food miles, yes, but the scale matter, right? So this is why researchers on logistics are that important to actually come up with different solutions to address the scale issue, right? In Luxembourg, we talk about regional and seasonal, which means sustainable food distribution that are all the producers well coordinated with the end consumers. So here is a concept that we have been developed for 8 years now, that is the food hubs. So the food hubs actually is a collaboration system between the producer, distributor, and consumer to strengthen the supply chain by shortening the supply, right? So here you can see in the graph, that is the best way of connecting all the primary producers with the end consumers. So here you can see school, universities, community groups, partners, workplaces, different communities that actually use these food hubs as a connection to connect local farmers with buyers. So in France, it's by law that this increase of local and organic production must be in a certain percentage, and it is coming higher and higher by law. And also in Luxembourg, there is an interesting percentage of the local production that should be in the menu of the school canteens. I think that's my intervention. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you very much, Laura. Is very, like thought-provoking to see that local short supply chains can serve as a way to, like reinforce how the different population segments are receiving like proper food in high quality. So probably one of the questions that everybody would have at the moment is like how we can make sure that there is a proper combination of global with local supply chains, right? And I know that this is something that we have been working recently. So I will leave this question on you now so that you can, like also think about it and we will come back to it. Okay. Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank
So
you.
last but not least, now let's go to Gabor. So Gabor, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I'm gonna start sharing your slides in a moment. Okay.
Thank you. Just before sharing the Krista slides, I would like to say a few words. I would like to welcome all of our attendees, and I wanted to address a couple of points before coming to those two quick slides. I think it's very important to talk about the fact that why is it happening that basically local farmers as well as agribusinesses are trying to focus on globalization and global supply chains. Why are we using supply chains and not value chains? And what is the main difference between the terms of supply chains as well as value chains? As you know, in case of supply chains, we are very much focusing on efficiency, whereas in case of value chains, we are talking about value creation. And when we are talking about local agribusinesses, local farmers, they are not necessarily focusing on optimization or efficiency, but rather on value creation and selling their products on a higher price, because this is ultimately what they want to achieve. And you might have came across the book "The Best Things First" by Bjorn Lomborg, and in this book, Bjorn Lomborg is actually analyzing which SDGs has the highest impact, and if you would have a certain amount of money, where would you invest? What would have the highest socioeconomic impact? And trade had the highest socioeconomic impact. So it's not surprising that during the time of globalization, more and more agribusinesses are trying to actually go on international markets. And also as a development officer, I can tell you that when I visit a country, very often agribusinesses and governments have the objective to go on a global market, whereas they have a lot of potentials in their own domestic markets, given the fact of the size of the population, growing population, and economy. And a few more words perhaps about UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. It's focusing on sustainable industrialization. And as part of sustainable industrialization, in many low and middle income countries, we know that agriculture and the food sector is one of the most important in terms of job creation, as well as improvement of socioeconomic perspectives like livelihoods. So this is the reason why at UNIDO we are also focusing on agribusinesses. And we know, and if you could share my slides, please, Chris. When we are talking about
Perfect,
food
Gabor.
systems and agri-value chains, it's very important to follow a three-path approach in order to create support services, because typically in a developed nation, you will have access to a number of innovation support services, whereas when it comes to developing countries, very often what you will realize that there's a lack of coordination, and because of this overlap of activities. On the other hand, there are limited partnerships, very often also issues between the public and private sectors, particularly trust issues, in order to actually create joint investments. On the other hand, when we are talking about innovation as such, sometimes what we see that the academic institutions are disengaged from the private sector, and you have to create platforms in order to translate the different type of local innovations and regional innovations into actually improved capacities and practices. And this is also another challenge which we have to overcome. And at the end of the day, of course, we have to talk about investment and financing, because those agribusinesses and local farmers might not have the required financial measures. They might be in the informal markets, which is another huge challenge because they don't have the evidences in order to get credit from local banks and upgrade their operation, possibly sell it to high-end buyers in local markets or even trade. So when we are talking about innovation support services, an international organization like UNIDO, which is trying to create tertiary services, is extremely important to convene the different type of partners. But what are those innovation support services? Typically, there is a large number of them when we are talking about agribusinesses, and logistics is indeed one of them. Besides basically packaging solutions, processing technologies, cleaner production technologies, agricultural inputs. They also need market intelligence in terms of market requirements and understanding what are the regulatory needs to enter to a market. There are conformity assessment services like testing, inspection, certification. They might have challenges related to energy or water access, which are fundamental needs when we are talking about the food sector, as well as basically financing solutions. So if we want to help local agribusinesses, not only just to reach international market, but even local high-end markets, they will require a number of innovation support services available at an affordable level. Otherwise, they are not going to be competitive at the end of the day, and they might turn away and start another profession or try to work in another sector. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Gabor, for your insightful, presentation as well. I think that in order to connect to what Yasmin said at the beginning, the fact that you are observing these different issues from a multidisciplinary and multi-level perspective makes a huge difference in terms of like how we should address these different components. Because as you mentioned in this innovation hub for agricultural transformation, as is typically called in your acronyms, you are able actually to address different potential challenges with the proper, like tailoring strategies in such a way that is going to be meaningful and adopted by the people in there, right? So one of the things that I would like to leave on your side by now is like, how should we as academicians and also as logisticians, there are many also here working with food, should we address this connection with government or with entities like yours? I know that UNIDO does plenty of this work in order to, as you said, push or foster the industrial development. So many organizations, companies, to be clear, they don't know that they can collaborate with you. But that's going to be a question that I will return in a moment. Okay. So now let's go to the Q&A session on my side. So and by the way, people from the audience, thanks for joining us again. If you have any questions, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A corresponding feature here. So I'm going to start with a couple of general questions to the speakers here. So, and by the way, Yasmin, Hamza, Laura, feel free to turn on your cameras. Now we are at that moment at which we need to see each other here. So let me start with something that is probably one of the main issues that we are facing now. For you, what are the main barriers you see for the agri-food value chains, or let me start using that particular terminology, not supply chains, but value chains, how we can start adding value, like to whatever we are bringing, and how we can overcome those challenges. I don't know, let me go with Yasmin first. Yasmin, could you like to emphasize something there?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Gabert, actually, for bringing this to our attention. Also, that supply chains should also be about value. So, and I think it's really time now that we think that food supply chains should really transform from focus on efficiency to the bigger picture, which is adding value. So my view, Chris, is we should really start with the farmers, with the local communities, with the small transport and logistics providers who work on these in these types of value chains or supply chains. I think we don't honestly, like if we want to talk about sustainability and resilient food systems, we don't have a chance unless we engage with these local communities, with farmers, with the small logistics providers, hear from them, train them in terms of climate awareness on the one dimension. On the other hand, also how they can be connected and embedded in global or even local supply chains, because many of them, they don't have the level of awareness. They are happy to learn, they want to engage, but there is this kind of disconnect between what we discuss in our circles and what actually is happening in practice on a day-to-day basis. I mean, and I think it became a common event that after a heat wave, suddenly an entire crops of tomatoes or any perishable food items, they completely went completely off, and then this means that they lose all their crops. So I think it's this kind of community engagement, community resilience, and supporting them with structured systems, so with knowledge on how to build capabilities, how to transform their managerial capabilities, or actually even develop managerial capabilities in the first place, so that they can manage and cope with these kind of cascading impacts.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. So I think that what you are saying is very interesting, because typically, if we think about it, everything comes from the farmer. So actually, there should be the first ones that we need to pay attention to, particularly with all the generational shift that is happening nowadays, right? So, Gabor, what do you think about it? So, because you are typically working with, like cattlers, farmers. So how do you believe that this might be a challenge, or you want to add like other challenges from other, like parts of the supply chain? That would be also great, or value chain.
Thank you very much, Chris. When it comes to people who are working in agriculture, it's definitely an area where we have to work on more. And there is already a number of initiatives working on this matter, especially when we are talking about climate resilience. The problem is that current economic structures which are in place in food systems, they are actually not always allowing farmers to break out from the poverty dimension, which is becoming the main challenge when we are talking about food security, as well as nutrition, malnutrition, and in general economic development. And to change these economic models at the moment, it's very, very difficult. And it also just accelerating the challenges we are facing with when we are talking about climate change, food loss and waste, as well as basically poverty. So where I would try to see, and I would also equally try to look into, is how we can actually accelerate the industrialization of countries to create better labor conditions when it comes to basically local population. We also see that in certain countries there will be a huge challenge when it will come to agriculture because of the aging population. In some European countries, the average age of a farmer is above 60 years, whereas basically what is happening in these days, that they have to bring people to do the harvesting from Asia, because there is basically no one to do this work. So there is also a lot of discussion about digitalization, data, robotics, and I think anyone who is interested in robotics, probably there are a bunch of posts coming up in your Facebook or Twitter or X, basically talking about the most recent harvesting robotic solutions being introduced in developed countries, which might resolve certain challenges, but not going to overcome all of them. And finally, probably we have the recipe, we have the technologies, but the financing gap is huge. And this is also partially related to the data gap we have when it comes to operators, and basically the required financial solution to scale those. So I think these three areas would have to be tackled first in order to see actual broader impact globally when we are talking about our food systems and value chains.
Thank you, Gabor. So lots of food for thought, right? So now I was thinking, and this is also a general question that I would like to ask to Laura and Hamza. So naturally, with all of these challenges that have been emphasized by our two colleagues, Gabor and Jasmine, um, we need to consider also what is happening nowadays outside, geopolitical shocks, issues with exports, a lot of piracy, a lot of like food security issues too, and many supply chain breakdowns. So, what do you think would be interesting strategies to build this resilience while making sure that people are receiving what they need in order to be properly nourished? What do you think, Hamza?
Thank you very much for this question. And I think, according to me, like geopolitical shocks, as you told about some export bans, or we can say like tariffs. So these kind of geopolitical shocks, I guess, expose just how fragile supply chain can be. And I think for the local ecosystem needs to be more autonomy, right? But I mean, one thing that helps is building a hybrid system in that case, and where local producers use digital platforms to plug in like a global trade, but still have tool to respond locally. For example, if the cold chain is disrupted, and if we have a real time data from IoT sensors, that will allow us to quickly reroute, or maybe we can save our time, and we can also save the perishable goods from being wasted. So it's not high tech for the sake of it, it's resilience through visibility and fast action. That's my point of view.
Thank you, Hamza. So, well, I would like to pass the word to Laura. Laura, what do you think about it? And then I will give you a little bit of my opinion on that too.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris. So I think there has been a lot of different things that the different government has been implemented so far, but one of the most important thing in my view is to not only connect the producers with the end consumers, but also to educate the end consumers. So changing a bit more on the strong local food supply chains, encouraging seasonal and local production, right? So if the consumers start consuming more local and seasonal food, then the authorities will need to diversify the suppliers, strengthening local food supply chain, investing on the concept that I presented, the food hubs, right, to connect both. And also one thing that Luxembourg as well as France has been implemented is the public procurement policies to actually prioritize local and sustainable food sourcing for students and for hospitals and so on. So I think if we have these disruptions, the local authorities has already some policies to help with these disruptions.
Thank you, Laura and Hamza. So, it's really interesting what you are saying. So basically, on the one hand, you have like the physical part of the value chain, and on the other hand, like the digital component, making sure that we have traceability, visibility in order to divert food wherever is needed, and in terms of like occupying these different local short supply chains to supplement whatever is also requested in different population segments. However, and I will echo one of the questions that we have in the chat, and I would like to bring it to everyone here in the panelists, is like, and thank you, Veronica Leon, for your question, is like, she says, thanks for the very insightful contributions to all the researchers. There are indeed many, many challenges in the food industry that you mentioned, but it seems almost an impossible problem to solve. From your point of view, what could be the starting point? What challenge should be prioritized? And I would like to add to that component, how should articulate the different stakeholders around that in order to make it hopefully a successful project or something that help us, like moving forward. So, Jasmine, would you like to address that? And then
Yes,
I move
thanks,
around.
Chris. Thank you, Chris, and thanks, Veronica, for the question. Great question. I might be a little bit biased, but for me, it's definitely the climate-induced crisis. This is an existential threat to food supply chains, to food production, and food distribution as well, because it doesn't just affect the agriculture side. What we found is there is a lot of research on the food production side, but then what happens after the food has been produced by the farmers, and the kind of the ripple effect across the entire supply chain until the until the products reach or the food reaches the consumers. This is crucial because it affects the quality of the food, it affects accessibility to food, it affects the quantity of the food. So actually, this is the whole definition of food insecurity. So for me, I would say we need to. It's very hard to say this is exactly the starting point, but I would say focusing on this climate change, and then I go back to my framework that I introduced at the beginning, is also having in mind this kind of cross-disciplinary approach, because it is an interconnected problem. And we might tackle it from different angles. But yeah, so these are my 2 cents.
Yeah. Thank you, Jasmine. So I will actually circulate the same question through the 4 of us, okay? So Gabor, what do you think about this? What should be the starting point to the 3 main issues that actually you posed there,
I think addressing informal markets. This is clearly where we have a lot of compliance issues, education issues, access to finance, and of course, what Yasmin highlighted is that all the challenges related to climate change, because very often where we know that we have data gap, and basically informal markets are mostly the places where we have data gaps. This is where we have most of the sustainability challenges when we are talking about social and environmental challenges, modern day slavery. At the same time, we have all the compliance from a product safety perspective. So addressing the issue of informal markets through better legislations and incentives for those operators and farmers to come into the market and be part of the white economy. This is potentially the most difficult challenge to tackle, but also the one to start with.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabor. Let me echo that, because actually some of the things that we have worked with most of you guys is to understand like the neighborhood level food supply chain or value chain, right? So everything starts in the neighborhood, right? So you don't have proper access to that food, is because the supply chain is failing, or maybe because the demand is not aware that they have these products available. So, and everything starts like bottom up. So we need to actually change a little bit the culture there. But regarding, like the connection, there is a tremendous disconnection, distrust systems between the farmers and the shopkeepers, particularly small family-owned retailers. So we need to change that, and instead of favoring or leaning towards bringing more, let's say, non-nutritional value-added products into the shelves, we need to change that, and that's cultural, and that's why it's so difficult to solve, right? But definitely, I echo the words from Gabor in terms of like the informal markets. We need to start looking at how, I wouldn't say formalize them, but we need to look at how we can connect them in such a way that despite they are informal at the beginning, the first stages, we kind of use that kind of informality in kind of an entropical way, so that we bring like what we need the most, that is fruits, vegetables, to the vulnerable population segments, right? So, and afterwards we can proceed with other stages, but that's my humble opinion. So let me go to Laura and Mohammed. So Laura, what do you think?
I think one important aspect is to train the local producers, to train to assess the risk, to train to encourage cleaner production, to train how to access the market, how to access in a fair way, considering the prices, but also on the same time train, as you were saying, the consumers. So for instance, in Luxembourg and in France, there are a huge conscience about the local production and how we eat in a sustainable way, how they choose when you are going to the supermarket, choose a fruit, where is this fruit coming from? So usually sometimes you have this information that is accessible. So definitely my answer will be training the consumer and training the local producers.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that opinion. Hamza.
Well, thank you very much. I guess all of you have already shared your opinion, and you have shared three different aspects. But there is still one question which we need to address: is how to reduce waste and how to invest in cold chain, right? And like Gabor and Jasmine talk about how to respond those climate change. So according to my point of view, I believe the best starting point would be the improving visibility and traceability across the food supply chain. For example, if we implement some mobile based IoT sensors or like QR code for traceability, I think it will help local producers or maybe distributors with some data and give much clear picture of what is happening in real world. So in that case, we will answer those questions. So in my point of view, we should invest in like basic digital tools. If we talk about small farmers or like local producers who does not have a lot of funds or infrastructure, so that's the starting point in terms of digitalization in food supply chain.
Thank you, Hamza. Any reply to that, Gabor? Or
Yes, I mean, the whole traceability aspect, because we are working on this matter in a number of countries. I worked on this dimension in Pakistan, in Balochistan, which is one of the most difficult area within the country, but also it's the fruit basket of the country, as they say. And very often, when we are talking about basic elements of traceability, and basic elements of traceability is actually just having a farmer diary recording the different pesticides, agrochemicals you are applying at the farm level, as well as the level of harvest, for instance, per tree. Farmers are very reluctant to do that. The reason why they are reluctant to do that, because if the tax authorities come to the farm and they want to look into your books, they will see that you might have taxed a lower level in comparison to what your actual harvest was. So whether it's paper-based or digital traceability, if there are no incentive structures, economic incentive structures in place for farmers, very often they are not going to change their practices. They might sell their products to a collector or to a trader, where basically they are getting mixed up and then being sold further. And the value creation, the value addition it remains very, very low. And our issue is when these products are being mixed together, that you don't know that which product was compliant and followed, for instance, was organically produced, whereas some other products might have been using already pesticides banned in a number of jurisdictions. So if there is no incentive structure for the farmers to actually use those solutions, whether it's paper-based or digital. Digital is, of course, has a lot of added value, then they are not going to change their practice, unfortunately.
thank you, Gabor. So definitely we need to link the theory with the practice and actually probably try to build this bottom-up perspective in order to make sure that whatever is like we are saying on the theory or top down is going to be actually applied by the different people in the field. Sometimes we face so many, like challenges in the adoption of some strategies that is difficult, especially if we are not used to that particular technology, or that particular good practice is completely unknown to us, or is different to what our culture is saying, right? So,
sorry, just I forgot to mention one thing, because
yeah.
when you are changing the economic structure in countries, basically, as part of that, for instance, in Ghana, there was a cocoa project by a multinational company where they used digital tools, especially when it comes to basically finance as well as traceability. They had a pillar on good agriculture practices, and they also changed the economic structure. So typically in a developing country, a trader might pay in advance before harvest for the farmers, and buy all the goods without knowing how big the harvest is going to be. And it means that they might get a couple of $1,000s before the end of the season. And what this multinational changed, they said, like, you are going to get every month a specific amount of money, like $500, if you are following the practices using the digital traceability tool, and basically you are complying with my, or conforming with my requirements. And because of this, basically farmers are breaking through the so-called Kuznets curve, so making more than $6,000 per year, which is required for financial planning in order to actually have a better education for their children, as well as comply with market requirements. So there can be very good practices which has to couple with digital solutions in order to make sure that there is an incentive structure in place for farmers and agribusinesses actually to comply with local, national, or regional requirements and regulations.
Thank you, Gabor. Definitely, the regulation component is something that we need to actually understand better, particularly in the logisticians field, However, let me switch gears here for a moment and actually comment on one of the questions that is stated in the comments feature. And this one goes to you, Laura. So there is a question that you just answered, but in terms of using applied research for companies and organizations and smallholder farmers, or these food hubs that you presented, this can be a tremendous enabler for agri-food ecosystems, right? So, but how can you empower smallholder producers or farmers or small players with this type of strategies? How can they be more representative, and not lose, let's say, bargaining power with the or representation when we compare them to the global supply chains?
So in Europe, universities work closely with local authorities, but also with farmers. So we usually use some workshops to understand the requests from the producers, but also from the market. And one interesting thing that I know that has been developed in France, so it's the University of Gustave Eiffel with CEREMA. They developed a tool that is called Logiku, and actually it's a tool for decision maker for the farmers to estimate the cost of delivery the food. So they have this tool that can be easily used through the cell phone to estimate, okay, I have these requests, I would like to deliver these to this set of customers, how we are going to do and what type of cost will be encouraged to do it. So this is just one example of how in France and in Luxembourg, the university works closely with companies, but also with local farmers to co-develop solutions for them to use and to have better strategies to address the market. Another initiative is the in Luxembourg, the ASTA, the Administration for the Agriculture Techniques. So they actually form the producers to conduct research for improving their practices. So the organic, for transition from non-organic to organic, to increase regional food production. So there are a lot of different initiatives from the academic side, but also from the local authority side to help these local producers with applied research to improve their operation.
That's very compiling. Thank you very much for that, Laura. I think that particularly short and organic supply chains are very important, and I think that they can position better with the proper regulation. So that helps a lot. And this brings me to actually an important question. This one goes to you, Gabor, because different from us in academia and probably a few other colleagues who have worked with the government, you are typically, connecting different dots, right? And let me come back to the question that I stated to you before. It's like, what role should public institutions play in governing agri-food digital platforms or the redesign of these food supply chains? Because UNIDO is doing a great job, connecting practitioners with governments, etc. But probably the missing piece for most of the logisticians is with the public sector. So could you please comment, how do you ensure that this inclusive innovation happens thanks to the participation of the government and also other entities?
Yes, definitely. I have to mention, in many countries, the economic system is still not well established in a sense, like in many Western or industrialized countries. Having said that, most of these large investments are coming from the public sector or with the leadership of the public sector. So it would be very difficult to not to include them in these initiatives. Having said that, one thing where we are trying to do more and build actually a consortium in collaboration with MIT, along with other private sector stakeholders, that how we can actually improve decision-making mechanisms of policymakers, relying more on data, or we could also say evidence, and how we can also improve the quality of data available for them along with the educational system. So this public education element and training decision makers is extremely important, particularly in countries where policymakers might be selected based on a political appointment, not necessarily a technical career, and they require some guidance in order to make sure that those investments which are going into transportation, logistics, and basically all the different type of services required along the value chain. So when we are talking about marketing, so packaging, logistics, cold chain, they are in place. Having said that, one of the largest challenges, what I also see when it comes to the public sector, is to make sure that private sector is able to make the required investments in those countries, and very often where we are also struggling with poverty and of course socioeconomic food insecurity. So socioeconomic access to food. Most probably those businesses and SMEs are not going to be able to afford paying for services. So governments have to subsidize certain services, and they also require more data for that. So this is the part where governments have capacities, institutional capacity issues, and then international partners can come in and support them in their endeavors in order to improve efficiency as well as compliance along the food supply chain.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gabor. This is very insightful. We are approaching the last, actually, 9 minutes of our conversation. So I probably take a couple of more questions, but I'm going to mix them, like with a few others that I have. This one goes to Jasmine. Let me see. Oh, it looks like Jasmine unfortunately needed to leave before. But let me then change the question. This one will go to you, Hamza. So the question is related more to, everyone is speaking about the use of AI, right? Or digital tools. And it has become more prevalent, like the use of these techniques. But I was wondering, in terms of data ownership and proper impact for different stakeholders, particularly local actors, how we can make sure that, let's say, big actors are not taking like the vast majority of the benefit, and also that the data governance is proper for this type of applications. What are your thoughts related to that?
Chris, I guess that's a really crucial concern, and one we absolutely need to address now, not later, right? So, because AI is very powerful,
Yeah.
and no doubt, uh, but we are not intentional. It risk depending of existing in agri-food supply chain, right? So, like as you said, industrial producers are already using AI for things like predictive maintenance or yield forecasting, or they are shifting their logistics system toward autonomous logistics, like they are using drones for spray or something like that, as we talk about farmers. But in rural communities, basic digital access like stable internet or smartphones, just like Gobar discussed about the Balochistan in Pakistan, that is very rural area. So there, the most of the people, even some places that the internet, or most of the people, they don't use smartphones. So that is a big challenge. We are talking about AI, but there are some places exist in the world which are still, I must say, a very backward. So the question isn't just how small is the tech, but who gets to use it, right? That is the question we are looking the answer for, specifically for local farmers. Because as I told you, for big industrial producers, there is a margin of adopting AI or such kind of digital technologies. But in terms of local producers or some kind of small producers, I think we need to design some kind of AI which is open source platform, and which integrates the local language support. I mean, to easily integrate the AI, and it will help them to speak and to be useful of using those AI to get benefit from the use of AI. So that's my opinion on that.
Thank you very much, Hamza. So definitely there is a lot that needs to be trained on the use of AI and digital platforms, particularly when discussing about solutions, especially we want to, like synchronize decision making. Well, we're in the last 5 minutes of this conversation, so I would like to go quickly around you guys, and please let me what you are the most optimistic and the most pessimistic about in the next 5 years. So let's start with the most pessimistic and then the most optimistic. Let me go to you, Gabor. What are you the most optimistic and the most pessimistic? If you can make it short and brief and sweet, that would be fantastic for the sake of time. Pessimistic first, optimistic then after. You're on mute, my friend. Here we go.
Pessimistic first, optimistic then. Pessimistic, I think, I don't think we are going to see that much development in comparison to today. This is what I'm very pessimistic about, due to the current geopolitical situation when we are talking about development. And most optimistic about, I'm optimistic when it comes to human nature, and that we try to help each other.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabor. Laura, same questions.
Well, for me,
Pessimistic
will
then
be
optimistic.
with this geopolitical tension. So for me, will be this that could hit supply chain faster than the local producers can adapt and the local system can adapt. And the most optimistic is increasing the share of local food supply chains, reducing the dependency on the food imports, increasing, strengthening the public purchasers for having more visibility on the local producers in the school canteens and others. And the small and local producers become more competitive and visible That will be my optimistic view.
Thank you, Laura. Hamza.
Well, I will follow the extend the Laura's answer, as she mentioned about the incentives for local farmers. So I think in terms of digitalization, I think digital inequity is something which is gonna to happen with the local farmers. If we are not careful enough right now, the same tools that could empower those local actors might actually make a gap, right? Especially in terms of policies or in terms of incentives or training. So it should there should be a pace, right? So we need to see there should be a digital equality, and the digital supply chain should be around all from industrial producers and from to the local producers. So this is my point of view.
Thank you very much, Hamza. So, unfortunately, the time is over, so we only have like a couple of minutes, but I would like to kind of recap a little bit of what was mentioned here. Just quick, like a reminder to everyone who has joined us and we were not able to actually answer your question live. We're gonna come back to you and answer these questions. I'm gonna make sure to collect them with our marketing and communications team, just to make sure that we come back to you and answer these questions. Most of them were like, let's say, tangentially answered, but I would like to get a clear answer for each of you. So first of all, it's pretty clear that these agri-food value chains are a very complex topic to deal with. It's true that there are like many different challenges that we need to face in the short term. But let me add here that I'm optimistic about like what researchers can do in order to like support everything that is being developed outside there for practitioners and public policy makers. I think that innovation typically grows where you plant the corresponding seed, and if policymakers are like believing in that seed, as mentioned by Gabor, so you can connect different things. I would invite us to think about, like, as many of the questions stated there, out of the box and think about like the supply chain perspective more than silos. Something else that I have a look with a careful look is that we are focusing too much on data and visualization without being able, like to, or actually on AI, instead of opening these black boxes, we need to actually start working on transparent boxes, something that we understand, that we build bottom up, and we actually build from the testimonials and the needs of people, particularly low income or developing countries. That's something that we need to continue developing. Food has many issues: food waste, food loss, food safety, food malnutrition. But I do believe that we, as I mentioned at some point in one of the forums, we can embrace each other, like strengths, and actually learn from each other in order to make this complex system a little bit more, like easy to handle, easy to manage. There are many ways in which we can collaborate and we can make it work. But it's true that we need to invest a lot on the training of people. And actually, that's probably one of the most challenging parts. We need to convince people that they should be trained on how to use different tools, on how to start using good practices, and human behavior at the end, right? So, but behavioral operations is one of the most interesting topics, and we will keep having, like food waste, unfortunately. But I think that we should find a way out of all of this by fixing some of the corresponding challenges that we have and start working in one of them. I already mentioned with many of my colleagues that the neighborhood level could be one of them, but I cannot, like put a, like something on my eyes and say like the global perspective is not affecting. It is. We need to make sure to also deal with all the tariffs, because and not only the tariffs, but also big issues like climate change that are affecting the cultivation cycles, etc., and the pricing too. So we need to bear that in mind and make sure that we connect with each other, and hopefully we develop more trust, on the different systems to start collaborating and doing something for good. So that's it on my side. Again, I just want to thank you all, Gabor, for joining us, Hamza, Laura, and Jasmine, who unfortunately need to leave early. I also want to thank our friends, the interpreters from Donati Translating Group. It has been a pleasure. Thank you all for joining us today. And hopefully we're able to continue conversations in a more, in a longer perspective and with a workshop or something like this. So there are many, many things that we need to discuss, but I'm really hopeful that this conversation today open new ideas. I know that the message is not necessarily the best one in terms of like the current circumstances, but I strongly believe that when we work together, academia, practitioners, public policy makers, entrepreneurs, and society, we can face the challenge and we can make a difference. So, and academic as well, academia, okay? So having said that, well, thank you very much, Gabor, Laura, Hamza, and rest of the team. It was a pleasure. So we'll see you next time. Keep, tuned with everything related to the MIT Scale Global Network that will have another quarterly seminar probably in a couple of months from now. Okay, that one I think is going to be in finance, but keep tuned. Okay, thank you guys.
Okay.
Thank you everyone. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye bye.